Guard discriminates against Nicki Minaj in boutique. What happened next? Marcus Johnson stood at his usual post inside the Gucci boutique, adjusting his collar for the 100th time that morning. The air conditioning hummed steadily, creating an artificial oasis from the scorching Los Angeles summer heat. He watched as a young couple pretended to browse the handbags, their nervous glances at price tags telling him they weren't serious buyers. Another day in paradise, he muttered to himself, checking his watch. 11:47 a.m. Talking to yourself again, Marcus? Jessica, one of the sales associates, teased as she walked by with an armful of designer scarves. You know what they say about that. Yeah. Only crazy people answer back, he chuckled, their familiar banter comfortable after 5 years of working together. Marcus took pride in knowing everyone's names, their stories, their rhythms. This store was his domain, and he protected it like it was his own. The morning crowd was thin, typical for a Tuesday. A few regular customers, the kind who actually bought things instead of just taking Instagram photos, nodded to him as they entered. Marcus prided himself on remembering faces, on knowing who belonged and who didn't. Good morning, Mrs. Chen, he called out to a frequent shopper. Those new Princetown slippers came in yesterday. Jessica set aside a pair in your size. Mrs. Chen beamed. Always looking out for me, Marcus. This is why I love shopping here. He straightened his tie, catching his reflection in the store's pristine windows. At 52, he still cut an impressive figure, tall, broad-shouldered, his gray-peppered hair, adding what his daughter called distinguished authority to his appearance. 15 years in this position, and he developed an instinct for trouble before it walked through the door. Maria, he called out to the new sales associate who was arranging a display. The bag goes on the left pedestal, corporate guidelines. The young woman jumped slightly, then quickly corrected the placement. Sorry, Marcus. Still learning. No problem. Just keep your phone away during floor hours. I've seen you sneaking TikTok videos. Maria blushed and tucked her phone deeper into her pocket. It's just for my fashion blog. I'm trying to build a following. Marcus shook his head. These young ones and their social media obsession. In his day, you learned the business from the ground up, earned your place. The morning continued its usual rhythm. Marcus watched a group of teenagers too closely as they handled a display of wallets, made sure the mysterious stain from yesterday's spilled coffee was properly cleaned, and directed 3 different groups of tourists to the nearest restroom. Hey Marcus, called out Patricia Chen, the store manager, as she emerged from her office. Corporate's doing another security audit next week. They're especially interested in our customer service metrics. No worries, Miss Chen. My record speaks for itself. Lowest shrinkage numbers in the district, and you know I keep things running smooth. Patricia nodded, but her expression was thoughtful. Just remember what we talked about last month, about making sure all our customers feel welcome? Marcus felt a flutter of irritation. He knew what she was referring to, the complaint from that couple who'd claimed he'd followed them too closely. But he'd been right. They'd tried to switch price tags. His instincts were rarely wrong. I treat everyone exactly the same, he said firmly. Professional and courteous, unless they give me reason not to. The lunch hour approached, bringing with it the usual mix of professionals on break and ladies who lunched. Marcus watched them all with practiced eyes, noting the authentic Hermes bags versus the Canal Street knockoffs, the confident stride of regular customers versus the uncertain shuffle of tourists. Marcus, called out Thomas, one of the newer security guards he was training. Can you cover the front for a few minutes? Nature calls. Go ahead, kid. I got this. As Thomas disappeared toward the back, Marcus resumed his post by the entrance. A small group of young women entered, giggling over a phone screen. Oh my God! Did you see her latest Instagram? One squealed. She's in LA. Nicki's style is everything. Another gushed. Can you imagine if she came in here? Marcus half listened to their chatter. Celebrities were common enough in the store, though they usually came during private shopping hours. He'd learned to treat them just like any other customer. Some were trouble, some weren't, and his job was to know the difference. The early afternoon lull set in. Marcus watched as the team restocked displays and straightened already straight items. The store's playlist cycled through its familiar rotation of ambient music. Outside, the temperature climbed, creating a shimmer of heat above the pavement. Your shift's going okay? Patricia checked in again, this time with a coffee in hand. Always is. Though Thomas needs more training. Kids too eager to please might miss something important. That's why we have you, Marcus. You've got the experience. He nodded, accepting the compliment. Experience was everything in this job. Learning to read people, to spot trouble before it started. The subtle signs that separated real customers from potential problems. Around 2 o'clock, the energy in the store shifted. A group of young shoppers pressed their faces against the window, phones raised. Is that? No way! Marcus straightened, scanning the street. A gleaming black Rolls-Royce Cullinan had pulled up outside. The vehicle alone drew attention, but it was the flash of pink hair that caused the real stir. It's really her, someone inside the store whispered loudly. Marcus watched as Nicki Minaj emerged from the car, her presence immediately commanding attention on the usually jaded Rodeo Drive. She wasn't trying to be incognito. Her pink hair caught the sunlight, her outfit was pure star power, and her confidence was undeniable. But something in Marcus's gut tightened. Something about the way she moved, the small group trailing behind her, the lack of advance notice from corporate about a VIP visitor. His hand instinctively moved to the door. "Store is at capacity, ma'am," he said firmly as she approached, his arm creating a barrier. "You'll have to wait." The words hung in the air like static before a storm. Through the spotless windows behind him, barely 8 customers browsed the racks in a space designed for 50. Nicki's expression shifted, surprise, then understanding, then something harder. Marcus had seen that look before, had categorized it as defensive, potentially problematic. But this time, something was different. "Excuse me?" Her voice was controlled, but her eyes were sharp. "The store's at capacity?" "Yes, ma'am. Store policy." He kept his tone professional, authoritative. Behind Nicki, 3 women, all blonde, all carrying designer bags, approached the entrance. Without thinking, Marcus shifted, his arm lowering, making space for them to pass. "Thank you," one of them chirped as they walked in, the scent of expensive perfume trailing behind them. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus could feel eyes on him. From inside the store, from the street, from Nicki herself. Something cold settled in his stomach, a creeping realization he wasn't ready to face. "So," Nicki said, her voice now carrying an edge that could cut glass, "the store was too full for me but not for them?" Inside, Maria's phone was still recording, capturing everything. The practice security guard, the world-famous artist, the moment when 15 years of experience couldn't hide what was really happening. The summer heat pressed down, the air conditioning hummed, and on Rodeo Drive, everything was about to change. Nicki's personal assistant stepped forward, her voice low but firm. "Do you know who this is?" Marcus stood his ground. "Ma'am, it doesn't matter who." "I know exactly what this is," Nicki interrupted, her eyes scanning the scene around her. The 3 blonde women were now pretending to examine a display of handbags, throwing furtive glances their way. Other customers had stopped browsing, phones discreetly raised. "And you know what? I'm going to let you finish that sentence. Tell me why exactly the store is at capacity for me but not for them." Inside the store, Maria's hands trembled as she continued recording. Jessica, the sales associate who had joked with Marcus earlier, stood frozen behind a display, her face pale with recognition of what was unfolding. "I'm simply following protocol," Marcus said, but his voice had lost some of its authority. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple despite the cool air flowing from above. "Protocol?" Nicki's laugh was sharp, cutting. "Let's talk about protocol. Let's talk about how many times this protocol gets applied differently depending on who's walking through that door. How many times have you done this today, this week, this year?" Patricia Chen emerged from her office, drawn by the commotion. Her eyes widened as she took in the scene. The growing crowd outside, Nicki Minaj standing at her door being denied entry, the 3 women who had just been allowed in. "Marcus," Patricia called out, her voice strained. "What's going on?" Before he could answer, Nicki turned to address the gathering crowd. Phones were out everywhere now, recording every word, every gesture. "Y'all see this? This is what we deal with. Every day. Doesn't matter if you're shopping at Gucci or the corner store. Doesn't matter if you've got $10 or 10 million. She turned back to Marcus. "You know what the saddest part is? You probably don't even realize what you're doing. It's just protocol to you, right? Thomas, returning from his break, stopped short at the scene before him. Marcus, should I call? Don't call anyone, Patricia interrupted, finally moving forward. Mr. Johnson, please step aside. But Nicki raised her hand. No, I don't want to come in now. That's not what this is about anymore. She pulled out her phone, scrolling through something. Let me show you something. She held up her screen, showing a series of posts from her social media. Pictures of her wearing Gucci, promoting their collections, supporting their brand. I've spent more money in this store than most people make in a year, but that's not even the point. The point is, this happens to people who don't have millions of followers every single day. People who can't pull up receipts. People who don't have cameras pointing at them. Marcus's face had gone ashen. Inside the store, the three blonde women were trying to quietly make their way toward the back exit. But the growing crowd outside had them trapped in their shame. Maria, still recording, caught everything. The tremor in Nicki's voice that spoke of years of similar experiences. The way Marcus's professional demeanor cracked under the weight of his actions. The shocked faces of other customers who were witnessing discrimination in its raw, undeniable form. Patricia stepped forward again. Miss Minaj, please, let me personally apologize. Save it. Nicki cut her off, but her voice was more tired than angry now. This isn't about an apology. This is about change. Real change. She looked directly into Maria's camera, though the young sales associate didn't think Nicki had even noticed her recording. And change starts with people seeing the truth. She turned to her assistant. Call corporate, not the store, not the district manager, corporate. They need to see what's happening in their stores. The crowd outside had grown larger, people recognizing the signature pink hair, the growing confrontation. Some were filming, others were sharing their own stories of being turned away, followed, harassed. Marcus stood rooted to his spot, his security badge suddenly feeling heavy against his chest. 15 years of experience, and for the first time he was seeing his actions through new eyes. The weight of countless similar interactions pressed down on him. Moments he had justified with words like protocol and security and just doing my job. Patricia's phone began buzzing incessantly. Corporate was already getting wind of the situation. The video was spreading across social media like wildfire, and with each share, each retweet, each comment, the story grew bigger than one guard, one store, one moment. Nicki took one last look at the store, at Marcus, at the crowd gathering behind her. You know what? Thank you. Marcus blinked in surprise. Thank me? Yeah, because this moment right here, it's going to make a difference. Not because it happened to me, but because now people can't pretend it doesn't happen at all. She turned to leave, her small entourage falling in behind her. The crowd parted, phone still recording, voices murmuring. As she reached her car, she paused and looked back at the store. The gleaming windows, the luxury displays, the security guard still standing at his post. Change is coming, she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Whether you're ready or not. The Rolls-Royce pulled away from the curb, leaving behind a scene forever altered. Inside the store, Patricia was already on the phone with corporate, her face drawn with worry. Marcus stood at his post, but his usual confidence had evaporated. And Maria, her phone still recording, captured the aftermath of a moment that would soon shake the foundations of luxury retail across the country. The summer heat pressed down on Rodeo Drive. But inside the Gucci boutique, everything had already changed. The air conditioning continued its steady hum, but it couldn't cool the heat of truth that had just blazed through its doors. Maria Rodriguez sat in the employee break room, her hands shaking as she stared at her phone. The video she'd captured was still open on her screen, paused on Marcus's stern face as he blocked Nicki Minaj from entering the store. What do I do? She whispered to herself, her lunch untouched on the table before her. What do I do? The door swung open, making her jump. Jessica, the senior sales associate, rushed in, her face flushed with excitement. Girl, tell me you got that on video. Everyone's talking about what happened outside, but nobody has. She stopped when she saw Maria's expression. You did get it, didn't you? Maria nodded slowly. All of it. From the moment she pulled up until she left. Jessica pulled up a chair, the metal scraping against the floor. Let me see. Together, they watched the footage. The quality was surprisingly good. You could hear every word, see every expression. Marcus's dismissive gesture, the three blonde women being welcomed in, Nicki's powerful response. It was all there, raw and undeniable. Holy shit, Jessica breathed. This is huge, Maria. I know. That's why I don't know what to do. Maria locked her phone screen, then unlocked it again nervously. If I post this, I could lose my job. But if you don't, nothing changes, Jessica finished softly. She'd been at the store for 5 years, had seen things, stayed quiet. How many times have we watched this happen, not to celebrities but to regular people? The break room door opened again. This time it was Thomas, the junior security guard, looking pale. Miss Chen is going crazy up there, he reported, dropping into a chair. Corporate's been calling non-stop. They're saying there are already tweets about what happened, but no video yet. He looked at Maria. But you have it, don't you? I saw you recording. Maria nodded again, feeling the weight of the moment. Her mother's voice echoed in her head. Sometimes life puts you in places where you have to choose between what's easy and what's right. I'm going to post it, she said suddenly, her voice stronger than she felt. People need to see this. Jessica squeezed her hand. Whatever happens, I've got your back. Maria's fingers moved across her phone screen, adding a simple caption. This happened today at Gucci on Rodeo Drive, number Nicki Minaj, number Gucci Discrimination. She pressed post. For a moment, nothing happened. The three of them sat in silence, watching the video begin its journey into the digital world. Then the notifications started. 1 like, 10 likes, 100 likes. Oh my God, Thomas whispered, watching the numbers climb. Within 5 minutes, the video had been shared thousands of times. Comments poured in. This is disgusting, at Gucci Explain. He really let those other women in right after? Nah, this ain't it. Working retail, I see this every day. Time to speak up. Maria's phone began ringing, numbers she didn't recognize. Her TikTok followers were skyrocketing. The video was being reposted on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Upstairs, the chaos was growing. Patricia Chen paced her office, her usually perfectly maintained composure cracking. What do you mean it's viral? She barked into her phone. How viral? 20 million views? In an hour? She sank into her chair. Yes, sir. Yes, I understand the severity. No, I don't know who posted it yet. Out on the sales floor, Marcus sat rigidly on a decorative bench, his security badge feeling heavier by the minute. His own phone was blowing up, his daughter, his friends, other security guards from neighboring stores. Dad, his daughter's text read, please tell me that's not you in the video. The store had closed early, citing a technical issue, but everyone knew the real reason. Through the windows, they could see the growing crowd outside. Signs were already appearing, shame on Gucci and end retail racism. Back in the break room, Maria watched as celebrities began sharing the video. Each share brought a new wave of comments, new stories of similar experiences. Look at this, Jessica said, showing her phone. Beyoncé's stylist just shared it. Says, this happened to them last year at a different luxury store. Thomas, who had been quietly reading comments, looked up. They're saying this isn't just about Gucci. It's about every store, every security guard, every time someone's been made to feel less than because of how they look. Maria's hands had stopped shaking. The initial fear was being replaced by something else. Purpose. Her phone rang again, this time displaying a number with a New York area code. The caller ID showed Gucci Corporate. What do I do? She asked, looking at Jessica and Thomas. Answer it, Jessica said firmly. You did nothing wrong. You showed the truth. Maria took a deep breath and swiped to answer. Hello? Is this Maria Rodriguez? A crisp voice asked. Yes. This is Amanda Phillips from Gucci's corporate office. We've identified you as the source of the video currently circulating on social media. Are you aware of the company's policy regarding recording in the store? Maria felt her heart rate spike, but Jessica's supportive presence gave her courage. Yes, ma'am. I'm also aware of policies against discrimination. Which one do you think is more important right now? There was a long pause on the other end. Then, Miss Rodriguez, would you be willing to meet with our corporate team? Not for disciplinary action, but to discuss what you witnessed and how we can address this situation. Outside the break room, they could hear Patricia's heels clicking rapidly across the floor, her voice stressed as she continued dealing with the fallout. Somewhere in the city, Nicki Minaj was meeting with her team, her words from earlier echoing, "Change is coming." Marcus remained on the sales floor, watching through the windows as the crowd continued to grow. His phone buzzed again. Another text from his daughter. "Dad, we need to talk about this, about all the times I tried to tell you." The video played on, shared across continents, translated into dozens of languages, sparking conversations in stores and homes and offices around the world. Maria's simple decision to press post had opened a door that couldn't be closed. "The thing is," Jessica said, reading through the endless comments, "everyone knew this was happening. We all saw it. We just didn't have proof, you know. Now there's no denying it." Thomas nodded, thinking about his own training, about all the unspoken rules he'd been taught. Marcus always said it was about instinct, about spotting trouble. But whose instincts? Based on what? Maria's phone continued to blow up with notifications. Celebrity after celebrity was sharing the video, adding their own stories, their own experiences. The hashtag number Gucci discrimination had evolved into number retail racism, then number shopping while black. Each iteration bringing new voices, new stories. A notification popped up that made Maria gasp. "Guys, Nicki just followed me." She sent a message. They huddled around her phone, reading the DM. "Thank you for being brave enough to show the world what we deal with. This isn't about me. It's about every person who's ever been made to feel less than. We see you, we hear you, and we're not staying quiet anymore." Patricia appeared in the break room doorway, her usually perfect makeup slightly smudged. "Maria? Corporate wants to see you first thing tomorrow morning." Am I fired?" Maria asked, her voice small but steady. Patricia's expression softened slightly. Actually, they want to talk about making you part of the solution." She paused, then added quietly, "What you did took courage. I should have shown the same courage a long time ago." As the afternoon wore on, the video continued its viral spread. News outlets were picking up the story. Social media influencers were sharing their own experiences. The conversation was growing beyond one incident, one store, one moment. "You know what's crazy?" Thomas said, scrolling through his phone. "Look at the comments from other security guards. They're admitting to doing the same thing. Some of them didn't even realize they were doing it until they saw this video." Jessica nodded. "It's like, sometimes you need to see something from the outside to understand what's really happening." Maria's phone buzzed with another message, this time from a major news network requesting an interview. The weight of what she'd done, what she'd started, was beginning to sink in. "Do you regret posting it?" Thomas asked softly. Maria thought about her mother, about all the times they'd been followed in stores, about the subtle and not so subtle ways they'd been made to feel unwelcome. "No," she said firmly. "Some things need to be seen, need to be said. Whatever happens next, at least now people can't pretend they don't know." Through the break room window, they could see the sun beginning to set on Rodeo Drive. The crowd outside had grown larger, more organized. Signs were being passed out. Stories were being shared. A movement was building, sparked by one young woman's decision to press record, to bear witness, to say enough. The video played on, a digital testament to a moment of truth that could no longer be ignored. In offices and stores across the country, executives were holding emergency meetings. Other luxury brands were examining their own practices, knowing they could be next. And somewhere in the city, Nicki Minaj was preparing to turn this moment into a movement, her words from earlier proving prophetic. "Change is coming, whether you're ready or not." The recording had done what no policy, no training, no corporate statement had managed to do. It had made the invisible visible, the deniable undeniable. And in doing so, it had set in motion a chain of events that would reshape not just one store, but an entire industry's approach to equity and inclusion. Maria looked at her phone one last time before heading home. The numbers still climbing, the conversation still growing. Tomorrow would bring corporate meetings, media requests, and who knew what else. But for now, she knew one thing for certain. She had done the right thing. The truth was out there now, recorded, shared, impossible to ignore. And with it, the possibility of real change had finally begun. Later that evening, Maria sat in her small apartment, watching as major news networks picked up the story. Her phone had finally stopped ringing, but her social media notifications were still exploding. "Mama," she said into her phone, "you're not going to believe what happened today." Her mother's voice was concerned. "I saw the video, Mija. Everyone is sharing it. Are you okay? Will you lose your job?" "I don't think so. Actually." Maria paused, still processing the day's events. "Corporate wants to meet with me tomorrow. They say they want my help to make things better." "Be careful, my amor. Sometimes big companies just want to quiet the storm." As if on cue, Maria's phone buzzed with another notification. This time it was from a civil rights organization, asking to speak with her about her experience. Meanwhile, across town, Marcus sat at his kitchen table, his daughter Keisha sitting across from him. "Dad," she said softly, "remember when I tried to tell you about what happened to me at the mall last month?" Marcus looked down at his untouched dinner. "When that security guard followed you around?" "Yeah. And you said I was probably just being sensitive, that he was just doing his job." Keisha reached across the table, taking her father's hand. "Now, do you understand what I was trying to tell you?" Tears welled in Marcus's eyes. "I've become the very thing I used to hate. When I was young, before I got this job, I knew how it felt. When did I forget?" Back at the store, Patricia Chen was still in her office, surrounded by empty coffee cups. Her computer screen showed email after email from corporate, from the press, from other store managers across the country. Her phone rang. The district manager. "Chen, here. Patricia, we need to talk about tomorrow. Corporate's sending a team first thing in the morning. They want to review all security footage from the past 6 months." Patricia's stomach dropped. "All of it? Every incident, every interaction. They're calling it a comprehensive audit of security practices." The district manager paused. "This isn't going away, Patricia. That video, it started something bigger than all of us. On social media, the conversation was evolving. The hashtag number retail racism had spawned hundreds of thousands of posts, with people sharing their own stories. Walked into a luxury store in Paris. Security guard asked to see my bank statement before letting me shop. I'm a neurosurgeon, number retail racism. Was told the store was closed when I tried to enter. Watched 3 white customers walk in right after. This happens every day, number retail racism. I'm a security guard. This video made me examine my own behavior. How many times have I done the same thing without realizing? We need to do better, number retail racism." Maria's video had been viewed over 50 million times now. News anchors were discussing it on primetime television. Social commentators were writing opinion pieces. Other luxury brands were rushing to release statements about their commitment to diversity and inclusion. Jessica texted Maria, "Just got an email from corporate. All staff required to attend an emergency meeting tomorrow morning. You started a revolution, girl." Thomas sent a message too. "My brother works security at Hermes. Says they're already changing their protocols. Your video scared every luxury retailer in the country." Around midnight, Maria received one more notification. It was another DM from Nicki Minaj. "They're going to try to make this about one store, one guard, one incident. Don't let them. This is about systemic change. You ready to help make that happen?" Maria's fingers hovered over her keyboard. Was she ready? This morning, she'd been just another sales associate trying to build a following for her fashion blog. Now she was at the center of a movement. Her mother's words came back to her. "Sometimes life puts you in places where you have to choose between what's easy and what's right." She typed her reply. "I'm ready. What's next?" Across Los Angeles, people were still talking about what they'd witnessed in the video. In homes, in bars, in late-night offices, the conversations continued. About privilege, about prejudice, about the small daily indignities that added up to systemic discrimination. Marcus finally went to bed, but sleep wouldn't come. His security badge lay on his nightstand, catching the moonlight. 15 years of service, and tomorrow, everything would be different. Patricia Chen finally left the store around 1 a.m., her high heels echoing in the empty space. As she passed the spot where everything had happened, she paused. How many times had she seen similar incidents? How many times had she stayed silent? And somewhere in the city, Nicki Minaj was in a meeting with her team, planning their next move. The video had provided the spark. Now it was time to build the fire. The recording played on, shared across time zones, sparking discussions in languages Maria couldn't even recognize. One moment of truth, captured and shared, was growing into something its creator couldn't have imagined. Tomorrow would bring corporate meetings, press conferences, policy changes. But tonight, in the quiet hours when truth settles into consciousness, change was already happening. In the hearts and minds of everyone who watched that video, who recognized themselves, either as the victim or the perpetrator, something was shifting. The truth was out there now, recorded, shared, impossible to ignore, and with it, the possibility of real change had finally begun. What started as a young woman's decision to record an injustice had become a catalyst for transformation. The video would play on, but its impact was already rippling out into the world, touching lives, changing perspectives, demanding better. And in her small apartment, Maria finally drifted off to sleep, her phone still buzzing with notifications, the weight of tomorrow's meetings ahead of her, but with the certainty that she had done something that mattered, something that would make a difference. The recording had done its job. Now it was time for the real work to begin. The employee break room felt smaller than usual, its beige walls closing in as Marcus sat alone, staring at the security footage playing on the tablet before him. Corporate had demanded he review all his interactions from the past 3 months. Each video clip was like a mirror, reflecting back truths he hadn't been ready to see. "I need you to document every interaction," Patricia had said, her voice gentler than he'd expected. "We need to understand the pattern." Pattern. The word echoed in his mind as he watched another clip. Himself, stopping a young black couple at the door while immediately welcoming an older white woman. I never meant to," he whispered to the empty room. The door opened, and Thomas entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He hesitated for a moment before setting one in front of Marcus. "Thought you might need this," Thomas said quietly. Marcus looked up, his eyes red-rimmed from hours of watching footage. "How can you even look at me right now?" Thomas pulled up a chair. "Because I've been watching my own footage too, we all have. And you know what? None of us like what we see." In Patricia's office, the corporate review team had taken over. Laptops covered every surface, each screen showing different security footage, different statistics, different patterns that could no longer be ignored. "The numbers are clear," said Sarah Jenkins, the head of corporate compliance. "Across all our stores, black and brown customers are 3 times more likely to be stopped, questioned, or followed." Patricia rubbed her temples. "How did we not see this before?" "Because we didn't want to," Sarah replied bluntly. "It was easier not to look." Outside, the protests had grown. What started as a small gathering had evolved into an organized demonstration. People shared stories through megaphones, their voices carrying through the store's walls. "Listen to this," Thomas said, holding up his phone. A local news reporter was interviewing protesters. "I've been shopping here for 20 years. An elderly black woman was saying, always dressed nice, always had the money to spend. But every single time, they make me feel like I don't belong. Today, we're saying enough." Marcus pushed away the tablet, unable to watch any more footage. "My daughter tried to tell me. Last month, she came home upset about being followed in a store. I told her she was being too sensitive." His voice cracked. "I told my own daughter her feelings weren't valid, while I was out here doing the exact same thing to other people's children." The break room door opened again. This time it was Maria, looking tired but determined. The video she'd posted had now been viewed over 100 million times. "Corporate wants to see you, Marcus," she said softly. He nodded, standing slowly. His security badge felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. "Maria," he called as she turned to leave. "Thank you for showing me what I wouldn't see myself." The walk to the conference room felt like the longest of his life. Each step past the luxury displays reminded him of moments he'd judged, assumed, discriminated. Inside, the corporate team sat around the large table, laptops open, expressions serious. "Mr. Johnson," Sarah Jenkins began, "we've reviewed the footage from yesterday's incident, as well as your history with the company. Marcus straightened in his chair. I understand if you need to terminate my employment. Actually, Sarah continued, we have a different proposition. We've seen the pattern in your behavior, yes. But we've also seen it in every store, with every security team. This isn't just about you. She slid a document across the table. We're launching a comprehensive review of our security practices. We want you to be part of it. Marcus stared at the paper. Why me? Because you've done the hardest thing already. You've admitted there's a problem. We need people who can speak honestly about how these biases develop, how they become normalized. Back on the sales floor, Jessica was helping a customer when she overheard two women talking. Can you believe what happened here yesterday? I know. I've shopped here for years. Never noticed anything. Maybe that's the problem. Jessica interrupted, unable to stay quiet. Some of us didn't have the luxury of not noticing. Outside, the crowd had grown again. Signs bobbed above the sea of people. Luxury is for everyone. Stop retail racism. Your money's good. Your melanin's better. Patricia watched from her office window, phone pressed to her ear. Yes, sir. We understand the gravity. No, the protests are peaceful. Yes, they have every right to be angry. In the conference room, Marcus read through the document before him. It outlined a new role. Diversity and Security Training Coordinator. You want me to teach others? His voice was incredulous. We want you to share your journey, Sarah explained. The realizations you're having right now, other security personnel need to have them too. But first, we need you to do something else. She gestured to a camera set up in the corner. We need you to tell your story. All of it. The biases you didn't recognize, the patterns you're seeing now, the impact on real people. Will you do that? Marcus thought about his daughter, about all the daughters he'd made feel unwelcome. Yes, but not alone. What do you mean? I want to hear from them first. The people I've turned away, followed, suspected for no reason except. He swallowed hard. I need to listen before I can teach. Sarah nodded, making notes. We can arrange that. Outside, a familiar pink-haired figure had joined the protest. Nicki Minaj stood among the crowd, not as a celebrity, but as one voice among many. This isn't about me, she called out to the gathered reporters. This is about every person who's ever been made to feel less than. Every person who's had to prove they belonged in a space that should have been open to everyone. Inside, Marcus watched her on the security monitor, remembering yesterday's confrontation with painful clarity. I used to read about civil rights history, he said quietly. Always wondered what side I would have been on. Never realized I was actually choosing a side every single day. Maria, who had been documenting everything for corporate, looked up from her laptop. It's not too late to choose differently. Throughout the day, more stories emerged. Security guards from other stores began coming forward, sharing their own realizations. Social media filled with accounts from both sides of the security desk. Those who had experienced discrimination and those who had perpetrated it, often without conscious intent. Look at this, Thomas said, showing Marcus his phone. A security guard from another luxury store had posted a confession. Watching that video was like seeing myself in a mirror. I've been doing this job for 10 years, telling myself I was being professional, following protocol. But the truth is, I was following something else. My own unexamined biases. Today, I choose to do better. Marcus felt tears welling up again. How do you apologize for something this big? Something you've done so many times without even realizing. Maybe it's not about apologizing, Maria suggested. Maybe it's about changing, really changing. The protests continued outside, but they had evolved. People weren't just sharing stories of discrimination. They were offering solutions, demanding specific changes, outlining what real inclusion would look like. Patricia emerged from another corporate call, looking exhausted but determined. They're implementing changes across all stores. New training protocols, regular bias audits, community advisory boards. She paused. Everything we should have done years ago. As evening approached, Marcus sat in the break room one last time, watching the sun set through the window. His security badge lay on the table before him, catching the last rays of light. The door opened, and his daughter Keisha walked in. She'd come straight from her college classes after he'd called. Dad? Her voice was soft, concerned. He looked up, really seeing her for the first time in a long time. "I'm so sorry, baby, for not believing you, for being part of the problem." Keisha sat beside him, taking his hand. "What matters is what you do now." Together, they watched as the protesters outside began lighting candles, turning the gathering into a vigil for all the moments of dignity denied, all the subtle and not-so-subtle ways people had been made to feel unwelcome. "They're offering me a new position," Marcus told her, "teaching other security guards about bias, about the patterns we don't want to see in ourselves. Are you going to take it?" Marcus picked up his badge, turning it over in his hands. "Only if you'll help me. I need to learn before I can teach, really learn." Outside, Nicki Minaj was still there, now sitting with a group of young women, listening to their stories. The media cameras had mostly gone, but the real work was just beginning. Maria approached Marcus and Keisha, her phone in hand. "Corporate wants to start the interviews tomorrow. People sharing their experiences, their stories. They want you to listen to every single one." Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of the task ahead. "Good. It's time I really heard what I've been trying not to hear for 15 years. The sun had fully set now, but the candlelight from the vigil cast a warm glow through the windows. In that light, Marcus could see clearly for the first time. Not just the harm he'd done, but the path forward. It wouldn't be easy. Real change never was. But as he sat there with his daughter, watching the peaceful gathering outside, he knew it was possible. The video had opened his eyes, but keeping them open, really seeing, really changing, that would be his choice to make every single day from now on. The aftermath wasn't just about one incident, one store, or one security guard. It was about the moment of recognition that rippled out across the industry, the country, the world. A moment when people on both sides of the security desk began to see clearly what had always been there. And in that clarity, there was hope for real change. Later that evening, Marcus sat with a group of protesters who had agreed to share their stories. The store had closed, but Patricia had offered the space for these important conversations. The luxury displays stood silent witness to the raw truths being shared. "I saved for 3 years to buy my first designer bag," a middle-aged woman named Gloria said, her voice steady but pained. "When I finally came in, your colleague, not you but someone just like you, asked me if I was sure I was in the right store." Another voice, a young man named Devin. "I'm a surgeon, still get followed every time I walk into a high-end store, every single time." Marcus listened, really listened, as story after story poured out. Each one felt like a brick on his chest, but he knew he needed to feel this weight. "How do you do it?" he asked finally. "How do you keep coming back after being treated like that?" An elderly woman named Mrs. Robinson leaned forward. "Because every time we walk through those doors, we're not just shopping, we're fighting for our dignity. For our children's dignity." The conversation continued late into the night. Outside, most of the protesters had gone home, but a dedicated group remained, their candles still flickering in the darkness. Thomas, who had stayed to support Marcus, was taking notes. "We need to record all of this," he said quietly. "Every story matters." Patricia watched from her office, tears streaming down her face. She'd opened her store every morning for years, proud of its elegance, its exclusivity. Now she understood that exclusivity had a darker meaning. Around midnight, Keisha returned with coffee for everyone. She'd been texting her friends, and many had shared similar stories. "Dad," she said, showing him her phone, "remember when you got me that job at the mall? The security guard there taught me the same things you've been doing. It's like a cycle." Marcus felt the weight of her words. The cycle had to break somewhere. Why not here? Why not now? Maria, who had been documenting everything, looked up from her laptop. "These stories, they're not just about security guards. It's sales associates, managers, even other customers. The whole system needs to change." As the night wore on, the conversations shifted from past hurts to future changes. The group began drafting recommendations. "Regular bias training isn't enough," Devin insisted. "We need ongoing community feedback. Security cameras should record how long guards follow different customers," Gloria suggested. "Make the pattern impossible to ignore." Mrs. Robinson added softly, And maybe, just maybe, start seeing us as people first. Not threats, not statistics. People. Marcus took notes, each suggestion both a judgment on his past actions and a roadmap for his future role. Around 2 a.m., Patricia emerged from her office with a decision. "We're not opening tomorrow," she announced. "Instead, we're inviting everyone back. Protesters, community members, everyone. Let's keep having these conversations." The small group looked around at each other, surprised but hopeful. "You know what the hardest part is?" Marcus said suddenly. "Realizing that I became what I used to fear. When I was younger, before this job, I knew how it felt to be followed, to be suspected. Somewhere along the way, I forgot." Keisha squeezed his hand. "But you're remembering now, Dad. That's what matters." As the night turned to early morning, the group finally dispersed. The luxury store, usually a symbol of exclusivity, had become a space for healing, for truth, for change. Marcus stood at his usual post one last time, but with new eyes. Tomorrow he would begin his new role, not as a guard who kept people out, but as someone committed to making space for everyone. The aftermath of the viral video was still unfolding. But here, in these quiet hours of truth-telling and listening, real change had begun to take root. And perhaps that was the most important aftermath of all, not the corporate policies or the media attention, but these moments of genuine human connection, of hard truths faced and accepted, of paths forward forged together. The sun would rise soon on a new day, bringing with it new challenges and opportunities. But for now, in the quiet of the store where it all began, hope flickered as steadily as the candles outside. 3 weeks had passed since the incident that changed everything. The Gucci boutique on Rodeo Drive looked the same from the outside: gleaming windows, pristine displays, the iconic logo catching the California sunlight. But inside, everything was different. "Remember," Marcus said to the group of security guards seated before him, "it's not about what you think you see. It's about questioning why you think you see it." He stood at the front of what used to be the store's VIP room, now transformed into a training space. The walls were covered with stories, statistics, and photographs, a visual reminder of why they were all there. "Mr. Johnson," one of the guards raised his hand. "How do we balance security concerns with making everyone feel welcome?" Marcus smiled slightly. It was the same question he'd asked himself countless times over the past weeks. "Let me tell you about something that happened yesterday," he began. A group of young men came in wearing hoodies and sneakers. 3 months ago, I would have followed them around the store, maybe even asked them to leave. Instead, I greeted them. Know what happened? The room waited. Turned out they were tech entrepreneurs. Bought over $30,000 worth of merchandise. But here's the thing. Even if they hadn't bought anything, they deserve to be treated with respect. In her office, Patricia Chen was on a video call with corporate leadership and, surprisingly, Nicki Minaj herself. "The Community Advisory Board is already making a difference," Patricia reported. "In just 3 weeks, customer complaints about discrimination have dropped to 0. Nicki nodded on the screen. "But this can't just be about one store. What about the others?" "That's actually why we called," said James Morrison, Gucci's new chief inclusion officer. "We want to roll this out nationally, and we want you to help us do it right." "I'm listening," Nicki replied, "but I have conditions." Meanwhile, Maria was showing a group of luxury retail executives through the store. Her TikTok following had exploded since posting the video, but she'd chosen to stay at Gucci, taking on a new role as community relations coordinator. "This is our new welcome area," she explained, gesturing to a beautifully designed space near the entrance. "No more security guards acting as gatekeepers. Instead, we have greeters trained in cultural competency and customer service." One of the executives scoffed. "And what about loss prevention?" Maria smiled. "Our theft rates have actually decreased since implementing these changes. Turns out when you treat people with respect, they respect you back." At his new desk, Thomas was reviewing security footage, not to catch shoplifters, but to ensure the new policies were being followed. "Look at this," he called out to Marcus, who was passing by. "Remember how we used to track how long we followed suspicious customers? Now we track how long we spend welcoming them." Marcus leaned over to watch. The footage showed the new team in action, greeting every customer with the same warmth, offering assistance without hovering. creating an atmosphere of genuine inclusion. Hard to believe it took a viral video to make us see what should have been obvious, Thomas mused. The door chimed, and everyone looked up to see Nicki Minaj entering the store. This time, there was no security guard blocking her path, no questioning her right to be there. "Welcome to Gucci," called out one of the new greeters, treating her with the same professional warmth they showed every customer. Nicki smiled, but she wasn't there to shop. She had a meeting with the team about the next phase of their initiative. In the conference room, she sat with Marcus, Patricia, Maria, and representatives from several other luxury brands. "Here's the thing," Nicki began. "What happened here wasn't unique, but your response to it can be. Instead of just doing damage control, you chose to create real change." Patricia nodded. "But we need to do more. The training program is working, but it's just the beginning." "Exactly," Marcus added. "Every day I hear more stories. Every day I learn something new about my own biases. It's an ongoing process." Maria opened her laptop. The social media response has been overwhelming. People aren't just sharing their bad experiences anymore, they're sharing how things are changing. "Look at these comments." She scrolled through recent posts. "First time shopping at Gucci, where I didn't feel watched. This is how it should be. Saw the new training program in action. Actually cried when the security guard welcomed my mom like she belonged there. Other stores need to take notes. This is what change looks like." Nicki leaned forward. "That's why we're here. Every luxury brand needs this program. Not just the training, but the whole approach. Community advisory boards, regular audits, real accountability." One of the executives from another brand shifted uncomfortably. "The cost of implementing all this is nothing compared to the cost of not doing it," Nicki finished firmly. "And I'm not just talking about money, I'm talking about human dignity." Marcus stood up, walking to the window. Outside, the store was busy with customers of all backgrounds shopping freely, comfortably. "You know what's different now," he said quietly. "Listen." Everyone fell silent. No security radios crackling with suspicious person reports. No whispered warnings about who to watch. Just people shopping. That's all it ever should have been. Patricia pulled out a folder. "We've compiled the data from the first 3 weeks. Customer satisfaction is up 60%. Sales have increased. Even employee morale has improved. Because we're not carrying the weight of discrimination anymore," Maria added. "Do you know how hard it was to watch it happen day after day? To be part of a system that hurt people who looked like my family?" Nicki surveyed the room. "So are you all ready to commit? Really commit?" The other brand's representatives looked at each other. The evidence was clear, but change was always scary. "Think of it this way," Marcus offered. "Every day we wait is another day someone feels less than human in our stores. I know. I was the one making them feel that way. Not anymore." One by one, the executives nodded. Contracts were signed. Commitments were made. Later that evening, as the store was closing, Marcus stood at his old post by the door. But now, instead of watching for threats, he was watching for progress. A young black woman entered, hesitating slightly. The muscle memory of past experiences visible in her caution. "Welcome to Gucci," Marcus said warmly. "How can we help you today?" The woman's surprise melted into a smile. "Actually, I'm here about the Community Advisory Board. I saw on social media that you're looking for members." Marcus felt his heart lift. "Perfect timing. We're having a meeting right now. Would you like to join?" As they walked toward the conference room, Marcus caught his reflection in the store window. His security badge was gone, replaced by a new one that read, "Community Relations and Training Director." The store had changed. He had changed. And slowly but surely, the whole industry was changing. In the conference room, Nicki was still there, listening as people shared their experiences, both past hurts and new hopes. The meeting wasn't about publicity or damage control. It was about keeping the promise of real, lasting change. "You know what the best part is?" Maria said to Marcus as they watched the group interact. "This isn't just about shopping. It's about dignity, about belonging, about seeing each other as human beings first." Marcus nodded, thinking of his daughter, of all the daughters who would walk into stores without fear or hesitation. The resolution wasn't just about policies or training programs. It was about transforming spaces of exclusion into places of welcome. It was about remembering that behind every security decision, every interaction, every moment, there were real people with real feelings and real dignity. The sun set on Rodeo Drive, casting long shadows through the store windows. But inside, something bright and hopeful was growing. A template for change that would spread far beyond one store, one incident, one moment of truth caught on video. Real change, it turned out, didn't come from corporate mandates or viral videos alone. It came from people willing to face hard truths, to listen to painful stories, to do the ongoing work of transformation. And in that beautiful, challenging, necessary work, everyone had a role to play. From the security guard who learned to see differently, to the young woman who dared to record the truth, to the artist who used her platform for change, to every person who walked through those doors expecting and receiving the respect they deserved. The resolution wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. 1 month later, Marcus stood in front of a much larger audience. Hundreds of security personnel from luxury stores across the country. The conference center was packed, and on the screen behind him played the video that had changed everything. "I watch this every morning," he told the crowd. "Not to punish myself, but to remind myself. Every face I see coming through those doors is someone's daughter, someone's son, someone's parent." In the front row, Keisha sat with tears in her eyes, proud of how far her father had come. "The hardest part," Marcus continued, his voice thick with emotion, "isn't learning new policies. It's unlearning old habits. It's questioning every instinct you thought was about security but was really about something else entirely." Maria, now head of the National Training Program's social media presence, live-streamed the speech to millions of followers. The comments poured in. "This man's journey from part of the problem to part of the solution gives me hope. Just had my first positive luxury shopping experience in 20 years because of these changes. Keep going, keep changing, keep growing." Nicki Minaj joined Marcus on stage, no longer as the wronged customer, but as a partner in change. What happened that day could have ended with anger. She addressed the audience. Instead, it ended with transformation. But let me be clear. This isn't about making people feel good. This is about fundamental human dignity. The new training program had already been adopted by over 50 luxury retailers. The statistics were undeniable. Customer satisfaction up, complaints down, sales increasing across all demographics. But more importantly, stories were changing. A young black doctor no longer had to bring her white colleague shopping to be taken seriously. A group of Latino students could browse without being followed. An Indian tech executive could shop with his backpack without being questioned. Back at the original Gucci store, Patricia had transformed the space into a model of inclusive luxury retail. The security desk was gone, replaced by a welcoming concierge area. The cameras were still there, but they were used differently, to ensure equal treatment, not to perpetuate bias. "You know what I learned?" Patricia shared during a training session. "Exclusivity doesn't mean exclusion. True luxury is about making everyone feel extraordinary." The story had come full circle. The store where it all began was now where people came to learn, to change, to do better. And somewhere in the city, another security guard was making a choice. Another customer was walking through a door. Another moment of truth was unfolding. But this time, thanks to one video, one moment of courage, and countless moments of change that followed, the story could have a different ending. Because sometimes, the biggest luxury of all is being seen, truly seen, as the human being you are. And that was a change worth more than anything on the shelves.